basic assumptions behind the experiment. There are various assumptions in every research studies. In the research which is based on experiment, we have particular assumptions. And the assumption, one which is to be mentioned here in this session, that is called the law of single variable. The law of single variable is that whatever change is to be recorded in the dependent variable is only and only because of the independent variable. That's because of the variation in the manipulation of the independent variable. So that is to be made sure by the researcher. And that's the point, which is actually the quality in experimental study, that whatever variation in the dependent variable is only and only because of the manipulation of the independent variable. So that is to be made sure. Okay. So when two situations are similar, like for example, that's an example. When two situations are there and the situations are similar, okay, they are similar in every aspect. They are similar in the environment. They are similar in the treatment. They are similar in the number, and they are similar in every aspect, right? So two similar situations are there, and when one element is added to one of the two, right, and then the effect of that added element, that could be addition of one element or reduction, deletion of one element. So when the change is observed in that situation, which is only because of the added point or the deleted point, that is to be noted down, right? So any difference which is developed in that situation which got the treatment, addition or deletion, when it is found, when it is observed, and when it is recorded, that's only because of that experiment, right? So that is to be made sure. And that is called the law of single variable, right? So any difference developed is the result of the operation which is given, the result of the treatment which is given. This is based on the concept of cause and effect, because every cause has an effect. So the effect of the cause is to be judged. So the effect of the cause is to be judged through experimental treatment, through experimental study. That's actually the basic philosophy behind experimental study. So the example of an experimental study is when you want to evaluate two groups of your, suppose, inter-level students. You are a teacher, you teach to them, and you want to just evaluate that how the change in the teaching methodology would affect the performance of the students. Okay, so you are actually planning an experimental study. So that experimental study is when you just plan an experiment. So you would keep two groups separately if it's a pure experimental study, and both of the groups would be evaluated in the beginning through a pre-test, for example. The pre-test which is given before the experiment. So the pre-test is administered to both of the groups, and then both of the groups are kept separately, right? So one is the control group, the other is the experimental group. The control group is the group which does not receive any kind of treatment, and the experimental group is the group which receive a different kind of experiment. So the control group is taught through the traditional methodology, and the experimental group is taught through different kind of methodology, like it is taught through task-based language teaching, for example, right? So when the treatment is given, proper treatment is given to the class under experiment, and it is for an appropriate time, which is, for example, in this study, it is for 2 months, right? So for 2 months, the experimental class is taught through the TBLT teaching methodology. And then after the treatment, again, the test is administered, which is called now the post-test, because it is carried after the experiment, so it is called post-test. Then you calculate the results and the performance differences, right? So that is a very, a traditional kind of experimental study. And that's a very good example that the pure experimental study is design in this example. Okay, we can also think about a quasi experimental study when the groups are not different, it's the same group, but two different performances are recorded. So that is called quasi experimental. So that's, the basic assumption is that whatever change is to be recorded, whatever change is to be evaluated, and that is only and only because of the the manipulation of the independent variable, and there is no intervening variable, there is no extraneous variable. So that is actually the assumption which is to be made sure, and which is always observed by the researchers who go for experimental studies.